Here we go. We got the first story from SCNR.com. BLM, Black Lives Matter, pans DNC as party of hypocrites for installing VP Harris as Democratic nominee. We do not live in a dictatorship. Delegates are not oligarchs. I have tremendous respect for whoever took over that Twitter account, that X account, and is calling out the DNC for doing exactly what we've been calling them out for. We have this thread from Black Lives Matter on X, verified account. How many followers they got? 1 million followers. Sunday, Joe Biden drops out. Kamala announces campaign with Biden endorsement. Kamala says she's going to work hard to earn the nomination. Kamala makes calls to party delegates Monday. Kamala Harris continues making calls to party delegates. Kamala Harris makes 2 public speeches. The Associated Press announces Kamala Harris has secured enough delegates to be the nominee by Monday night. Kamala releases a statement noting she has worked hard to go out and earn this nomination as promised. A 24-hour process of talking to party bosses is not democratic, nor is it a process Democrats should be proud of. We do not live in a dictatorship. Delegates are not oligarchs. Installing Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee and an unknown vice president without any public voting process would make the modern Democratic Party a party of hypocrites. We call on the DNC to create a process that allows for public participation in the nomination process, not just a nomination by party delegates. Here, Black Lives Matter. And I want to say this. We were just at the RNC, the Republican National Convention, and it was a whole lot of fun. Had a cheeseburger with a gluten-free bun. How about that? And many people asked if we're going to be at the Democratic National Convention, to which I said absolutely not, because I've grown quite fond of living. I do not want to go to the DNC where it's going to be violent and chaotic. Several people asked me, why would the DNC be more chaotic than the RNC? Wouldn't the left protest the right? Absolutely not. There were some protesters. They stood outside, they waved little flags, and they complained, and they said Donald Trump should be in prison. And we said, okay. And that was it. The DNC is the door for the far left extremists. The far left protesting the RNC is basically them trying to scale the Great Wall and to break their way in. That's an absurdity. The Democratic Party, however, is a door guarded by a few party elites that they feel they can break down. Now that Kamala Harris is trying to play the I just get to be the nominee game, and the progressive far left wing, especially with that protest we saw in D.C. of the anti-Israel groups taking over, these people are not going to accept this. So it's going to be a brokered convention. And just like in 1968, it will be a brokered convention. And they also expect it is going to be bedlam outside.
What's a brokered convention?
There's no stated so normally in a primary process, everybody votes. The delegates from the area where the vote takes place are pledged to support the person people voted for, kind of like the Electoral College. So you've got like 5 delegates in one area, and they say everybody votes for Joe Biden. Those delegates are loyal to Biden. They show up at the convention, and they cast their vote. A brokered convention, they can do whatever they want. There's no nominee. So Kamala Harris calls up all these delegates and says, you're going to vote for me? And they said, you got it. And she publicly announces, I've got the nomination. So the far left is not going to have it.
Right. It deters anyone else from challenging her. It was amazing to me how quickly everyone sort of got in line behind Kamala Harris, who, let's remember, was a farther left option who did not make it very far when she ran her own presidential campaign. But it's like of the 47 Democrats in the Senate, 45 had already thrown out endorsements for her. One of the only ones who hadn't, well, one was Bob Menendez, who's, going to resign has resigned, and he was found guilty. So he's kind of in an outward position anyways. But then also it's John Tester from Montana, who probably can't come out and endorse Harris because he's in a state that is likely going to get flipped. I mean, there's a very serious belief that will become a Republican seat. And then in the House, it's like, I think in total I have 192 people have already endorsed, of like 212 have endorsed Harris. I mean, they just fell in line so quickly, including Chuck Schumer, who waited 48 hours and then said, now that the process has played out, we're going to endorse Harris, which is like, what process?
And you see when he clapped for himself and nobody clapped?
Yeah, it was
really... like, Kamala won, and then no one clapped.
It's like, oh, okay, I'm clapping.
On my drive over here, I was like, okay, this is the party that's been screaming about protecting democracy. We have to stop the threat to democracy. Then a candidate gets installed. Yeah. And I see people posting about how grateful they are that a candidate got installed, threatening the democratic process for the people that are afraid of the threat to democracy.
There were complaints in 2016 when Hillary Clinton, it seemed like the process was rigged in 2016. And so then to be reliving that.
Seemed like.
Yeah, I mean, it clearly was rigged in 2016. And yeah, I mean, this is even worse. I mean, at least that played out over a primary season. And here it's like this bait and switch where there have been primaries and caucuses for Biden, and then, like I said, overnight turn of a switch. I think it is.
I think it was the plan.
Yeah, I mean,
Because you look at 2016, we know that there were a series of, let's just call them awkward moments. And I'll clarify this too, rigged. Of course, the far left and the media is going to attack that by making the claim that we're saying Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton went behind closed doors and shifted votes. No. The media was colluding. The party officials were working to the greatest extent imaginable to block Bernie Sanders. We know that, like, Hillary Clinton was given the questions in advance by, I think it was Donna Brazile. I could be wrong. It's been a long time.
Donna Brazile.
Yeah, and then you had the WikiLeaks emails that got WikiLeaks released the emails, and we saw great party collusion to block Bernie Sanders, the popular Democratic choice. Once again in 2020, all these candidates unite against Bernie Sanders, endorse Joe Biden to shift all those votes. And I think the reason they did this structure, keeping Joe Biden as long as possible, was to block any other grassroots contender, because let's be real, RFK Jr. would be the Democratic nominee were it not for this game they played. Kamala Harris could not get a single, what did she get a single delegate? Not one. She drops out in disgrace, and now she's the nominee? By what metric should she be the nominee? Black Lives Matter, bravo for calling her out. But I'll say it, Chicago is going to be, let's just pray for our friends and families in Chicago.
I've been praying for Donald Trump, to be honest, for his safety and his health, because if something were to happen to him, I'm like wargaming in my mind, who would become the Republican nominee? Would it be Vivek? Would it be J.D. Vance at this point? Would it be Nikki Haley? And then she's more salvageable than Kamala, and then we get Nikki Haley and Pompeo as the president VP, and then they take us into war with Iran. Like,
real quick, what do you mean salvageable? Do you mean like she'll be worse than?
No, like more palatable, I guess is a better word.
I see. Okay,
Nikki Haley would be more palatable than this girl who got no delegates in her first attempt when she was her campaign was completely sunk in like a 3-minute diatribe by Tulsi Gabbard talking about her record in California, imprisoning, like keeping people in prison for slave labor.
Yep.
Arresting people. I don't know what
it was an amazing moment from Tulsi Gabbard when she was
really highly recommend watching that clip again. But I pray for
pull
Trump's
that clip
safety
up. We'll play it in a little bit.
And for a legitimate process right now.
Yeah, dripping with irony that the left continues to attack our democratic processes while screaming about being the sacred guardians of democracy.
Right now, you've got Donald Trump, who is chosen for the Republican Party by popular mandate. They held a primary process. Nikki Haley was involved. Vivek Ramaswamy was involved. You had Ron DeSantis. That was a real primary. In the early days of the primary, I remember when we were in Des Moines, Iowa, Vivek was legitimately like, I want to win. Nikki Haley is running. We were hoping Vivek would beat Nikki Haley, but we still wanted Trump to win. And the people voted and said, we want Donald Trump. And there you go. Vivek bows out and has now taken an amazing role. I don't know what his official role is. He's working with Trump or whatever, but he's been very active in Republican Party politics. He's been speaking at many conventions.
And he's buying up BuzzFeed. I mean, he is really committed to what he said he was going to do, which is he wanted to change culture. I think that's commendable.
Even Nikki Haley has now endorsed Donald Trump. So they're all lining up saying, look, this is the people's choice. The Democrats are doing the opposite. And they're just like, you don't get to say. Your choice was Joe Biden because that's the only person we allowed. We ousted RFK Jr. Now Biden's leaving because he's infirm, and we're telling you it's Kamala. It is the Democratic Party, anti-democratic, calling the party with actual democratic voting processes fascists.
One of the there's like a less than. I think there are 12 members of Congress, less than 20, that have not. They've released statements on Biden leaving, but they haven't endorsed Kamala Harris. And one of them is Rashida Tlaib, and she's like the Palestinian American elected official. And so I think there are actually more people who would have liked to see other options. And there is probably pressure coming internally, like fall in line, do what we say. Otherwise, we will potentially not support you in your race for re-election.
Yeah. AG, you're voting for Trump, I'd imagine.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'm curious about like the pressure in the party, because I know for a long time you have this split. You have Republicans who despise Donald Trump, but it seems like that's mostly shifted away as many members of the party at the higher level, like people who have been in elected office for a long time, have begun to accept that the people think he's the right choice.
Yeah.
Have you felt pressure from any groups to be like, like early on with DeSantis, we don't want Trump? Or has it been fairly easy to just say, look, I want to vote for Trump?
I mean, it's always been easy for me. I was the first statewide official to endorse President Trump, and it's because he leads a movement that puts Americans first and has led a movement that has expanded the Republican Party to places it wasn't going to go on its own, and no one else was going to get us there.
Look at this guy.
Yep.
You're voting for Trump, right?
I mean, the jury's out, man. I don't know if I'm going to vote.
He's going to vote for Trump.
But I'll tell you what, I support the democratic process above all.
I mean, it's just we're at this point where a middle of the road person is just like, well, I don't want to choose Kamala, Kamala Cop, who is appointed. Donald Trump, at least, there's a lot of people who are behind him, but no new wars. I mean, you can throw everything out the window, just say no new wars. Of course, they're going to call Trump a fascist. It's BS.
This whole this concept, this logic, it's illogical that you need to override the democratic process to protect against the threat to democracy is insanity. Truly, the definition of insanity.
Yeah, I mean they are focused on they think that the ends justify the means, and that violates basic rule of law principles. It's antithetical to who we are as an American people, as a constitutional democratic republic.
How can people push back against this if they truly believe this is?
I think taking action at the convention to the extent, I think that's where people are going to sound off on this. And at the end of the day, the Democratic Party, like I said, you've had caucuses, you've had primaries. Those people have spoken, and now their voice is being stifled and silenced. This has never been about a process. It's always been about control, to your point.
I'm ready to join some of these protests. I literally don't want to join a leftist protest because they're going to burn things down and hurt innocent people. But I mean, in spirit, from the armchair level, I'm right there with, if Antifa shows up in Chicago to protest the Democratic Party, I support their peaceful endeavors, challenging the party and calling them out. The DNC is as corrupt as they come. It's been this bad since 2016. And what drives me crazy is, I was for Bernie 2015. I was like, Donald Trump seemed like to me, he seemed like it was a clown show. I was just like, I don't know what that is. It does not seem real or legitimate. It seems too jokey. Hillary Clinton she actively was promoting war with Russia. And now look where we are. And I'm just like, none of these people make any sense. And then comes Bernie Sanders, and he's just he wasn't worth a lot of money at the time. He was advocating for workers' rights. He had a lot in common with Donald Trump. Look, and I mean it. Go back to 2015 and look at the policies they shared. They both hated the Trans-Pacific Partnership. They were in favor of better trade deals for the American worker. Bernie Sanders said no open borders. In 2015, he said that's a Koch brothers proposal and he actually said, my God, if we open the borders, what would happen? They'd all flood this country. Not that I like Bernie now. He's certainly abandoned those principles and shifted completely in the direction. But ultimately, my point is, here we are now. At this point, I'm just like, the Democratic Party ousting him has proven there is no real process there for the people who want to see change. But there are, and what irks me is liberal pundits and personalities saying we approve and accept the party choosing for us. And because we approve it, that's democracy. You never got to vote. You never got to say. And that's why I'm totally out. And so when you mention, Attorney General, that Donald Trump has expanded the party, look at me and many of our guests. You've got libertarian, you got Mises Caucus people now who are saying they're going to be voting for Donald Trump because he has been a popular president.
I think there's huge groups of people, there are huge swaths of this country that feel left out. And Donald Trump has given them a voice. They still love this country. Kitchen table issues matter to them. Donald Trump's the only one talking about those issues. Kamala Harris isn't. And if you feel left out, you feel like you don't have a voice in the process, and you see something like what we've seen over the past 72 hours with Kamala Harris, that exacerbates that problem. And I think that's going to continue to push people back to Donald Trump and the Republican Party.
She said, we were watching Fox, and she's like, I'll put my record up against Trump's anytime. And I was like, what? What did you do? Like, if Joe Biden wants to make claims about his executive orders and the things he's done, like, okay, I guess. Biden has signed executive orders and has advocated. What did Kamala Harris do? She did nothing.
Because the borders are literally,
and she didn't go.
Much.
She didn't go.
There's that interview where they're like, have you been to the border? She says, we've been to the border. And he's like, no, you haven't. She's like, well, I've also never been to Europe. Why is that relevant?
Well, I mean, it's worse. She's like, they keep saying, we've never been to the border. We have been to the border. And he's like, but you haven't. And then she goes, and I haven't been to Europe either.
Yeah, it's just okay. It's nonsensical. The thing about Kamala Harris's campaign that I find fascinating is, and maybe you can unpack this for us, but they're starting to say, well, she was this tough prosecutor, and therefore she can prosecute Donald Trump because he's done all these horrible things, apparently. But she also has to be in the position where she defends the Biden-Harris administration. Remember, they never let us forget that she was there, even when they had shuffled her sort of to the personnel background. And so she's trying to run on her legacy as a prosecutor, which I have always heard right and left gets very mixed reviews, and also decide if she's going to stand by Joe Biden and say, I'm finishing the job he started, or if she's going to kind of attack this guy who has now just recommended her. The calculations there must be crazy. Do you think the American public would respond to her as a tough prosecutor?
No, I think she's going to own the failed policies of the Biden administration. People are looking around, and again, it's almost back to school time, and working families are like, how am I going to afford a new backpack and school lunches for my kids? Like, that stuff matters to people. And, the border crisis. I mean, in Missouri alone, we've had 1,100 reported incidences of human trafficking in 1 year, more than 1,500 deaths from fentanyl exposure in 1 year, 43 innocent children who died from fentanyl exposure in 1 year. Those are real harms. So, like, Biden's failures to secure our national sovereignty and his hanging an open sign at the southern border are making Missouri communities less safe. Every state's a border state. I mean, these things, again, they matter to everyday working Americans, and Kamala Harris is going to have to own those things.
Thanks for watching this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to check out the live show Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. on this channel. Subscribe, and we'll see you all there.